Welcome to the No Name podcast that isn't a real podcast and is actually my homework assignment podcast. My name is Anna, and I will be your host today. With me is my close friend Ellie. Ellie, give a hi to the people.
Woo woo! Hello!
Ellie is a very successful veterinarian. She is not a student, and she has also never hosted a podcast that isn't a real podcast.
This is true.
So today we're going to be diving into a long-standing issue in Umatilla County where there are nitrates in the drinking water. But first, how are you doing today, Ellie?
I'm doing great. Finished work, had some dinner, we're ready to go. We're ready to learn about some nitrates in our lovely state of Oregon.
It's going to be so good. So let's get right into it. First, we're going to talk about nitrates.
Cool. First of all, what are nitrates?
Nitrates are compounds of nitrogen and oxygen that are found in the air, soil, water, and some foods. They're totally natural. Plants and animals, including us, because we are animals, we need them, and we are actually producers of nitrates. Various industries use them too. Nitrates are often used as fertilizers for crops and lawns. They're used in food preservation, some medications, and in ammo and explosives.
Okay, so nitrates don't seem that bad, but how do they end up in drinking water?
It's pretty complicated. Have you ever heard of point source and non-point source pollution?
That rings a bell way back when in maybe high school biology, but it's not totally clear to me.
So point source pollution is going to be visible and very obvious pollution. So maybe a factory spewing sludge into a river, or a factory spewing black smoke into the air out of its smokestack.
Okay, that seems pretty easy.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Non-point source pollution is less obvious, and you won't be able to point to a sludge spewing factory or a smokestack. So big ag, runoff from cities, logging, coal mining, etc. all produce chemicals that sit on the Earth's surface. When it rains, all of those chemicals are going to flow into our rivers, lakes, streams, aquifers, and then that is non-source pollution. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's kind of like you know that something's there, but you don't really know where it came from necessarily.
Exactly.
Nice.
So nitrates mostly end up in drinking water because of non-point source pollution. And a huge non-point source of nitrates is from big ags, like big agriculture.
Yeah.
Big ag uses a lot of fertilizers for their crops, and they produce a crap ton, pun intended, amount of animal waste. So remember that fertilizers are full of nitrates, and so is animal waste. So when it rains, all of those nitrates flow right into, as I said earlier, the streams, rivers, and lakes, and then they seep into the soil, into underground aquifers where we get our drinking water.
Okay, so what's going on in Umatilla County, here in our home state?
All right, let's talk about Umatilla County. So Umatilla County, we'll give you a little background on it before we go into the nitrate issue. So Umatilla County is located in northeastern Oregon. It's considered a high desert.
Yep.
The area consists mostly of grasslands and shrubs and receives little rain. Again, high desert. There are about 80,000 people in the county, and the county is considered mostly rural. The county is home to the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area. That is a mouthful.
Yeah.
They have an acronym for it, but it's ridiculous.
Okay.
So we're just going to say the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area.
Every time.
In Umatilla County, agriculture is the backbone of the economy. About 19% of the county lives in poverty, and the county is majority white, though over a quarter of the county is Hispanic. I think it's roughly 22,000 people. And there's roughly 3,000 Native Americans in Umatilla County.
Okay.
So 34 years ago, that would be 1990, which is wild that that's 34 years ago already. Oregon discovered that an aquifer in the lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area,
Good job. Great job.
such a mouthful, was heavily contaminated with nitrates.
Oh, shoot.
Right? This aquifer is massive, and it covers 562 square miles in both Umatilla and Morrow, which hopefully that's how I say that, counties. Umatilla and Morrow counties, even though we're mostly focusing on Umatilla, Morrow County is just kind of like the little sister in this. So Morrow County will just kind of be included.
Okay.
So most of the rural area, aka Umatilla County, they get their water from wells that tap into this huge contaminated aquifer. And that's roughly 4,500 households, majority low income, rely on that aquifer for their water. The state, more specifically the Oregon Health Authority, has been providing free testing for these wells. And as of August of this year, roughly 1,700 households have tested their water, and over 430 of them are testing between 5 to 10 milligrams per liter. The EPA sets the limits for nitrates in water at 10 milligrams per liter. So anything above 10 is really bad.
That sounds pretty scary. It sounds like they're doing some testing and things like that, but it's kind of late to the game. Like 2024, after figuring out in 1990 that it was contaminated.
That's what I'm saying. Ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, the poor people who live there, like, they probably could have been drinking this for decades and not known.
Literally 34 years.
Yeah. But what happens, like, above 10? If we're testing above 10, like, what could happen to the people drinking the water?
So the EPA says if nitrates are above 10 milligrams per liter in the water, it can impact your health, obviously. And that can lead to respiratory infections, thyroid dysfunction, stomach cancer, bladder cancer. Nitrates are also suspected brain and central nervous system carcinogens, aka cancer causing. And remember, over 430 wells in the area have already tested between 5 to 10 milligrams per liter. And experts say that the nitrate levels in the water are still rising.
Yikes.
Yes.
This is like all stuff I deal with at work. Like thyroid dysfunction is no joke. Cancer is scary. It's really, really scary. And it's really harmful to the pets that I see. But like for people, I'm sure it's just as bad.
Scary in pets and people.
Yeah.
So nitrates are also particularly harmful to babies and pregnant people. Nitrates can reduce the ability of blood to carry oxygen to vital bodily tissues in babies 6 months or younger. Still not good for babies older than 6 months, but so this lack of oxygen in the blood leads to an illness called methhemoglobin anemia. I don't know how to say it.
That's pretty close.
Well, yeah. Do you know how to say it?
Yeah, this is cows get this.
Wait, how do you say that?
Methemoglobinemia?
Words from a vet, people. Words from a vet.
Basically, their red blood cells just like collapse and die and they get brown, like they get brown urine and stuff like that. It's pretty serious.
That's not good.
It is treatable in cows at least, but I mean in a baby, that's really scary.
In babies, it's called blue baby syndrome. And let me tell you, we don't want any blue babies.
No.
Blue babies, bad.
Okay, so we know there's nitrates in the water, but why? Like, how do they get there?
That's a really good question, Ellie. So while there's no one culprit, which is non-point source pollution at its finest, the nitrates have been definitively linked to food production from farms in the area, aka, again, Big Ag. Things like fertilizers spread on the fields and animal poo from large animal feeding operations. It's been estimated by state officials that 70% of the nitrate problem in Umatilla County stems from agriculture, although it's difficult to know what stems from farming practices that were taking place 50 years ago and what could be from recent weeks and recent months.
Yeah.
Well, the issue of pollution falls under several agencies like the Oregon DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality. The issue rests heavily on the Oregon Department of Agriculture because the 70% of nitrates are coming from food production and farms.
Okay. So it's coming mostly from agriculture. There's got to be like regulations in place, right? Like there's got to be somebody doing something to stop the nitrate pollution.
Another excellent question. For decades, Oregon has relied mostly on voluntary actions from food producers and farms to stop the contamination.
That seems like it might not work the best.
It did not. It definitely did not work, and the contamination has gotten worse.
Okay.
So according to Charpilovaz, we're going to call that person Hansen, the director of Oregon Department of Agriculture, there are about 160,000 acres of irrigated land in the lower Umatilla Basin, and only half of those acres have permits that track how much water and how many nitrates are put on the fields. So that means the other half, which is 80,000 acres, we don't know how many nitrates are being put on the fields, which is crazy. That's a lot of acres.
Yeah.
Even with permits, the Oregon Department of Agriculture is relying on voluntary actions to reduce that nitrate pollution. And ultimately, the state hasn't wanted to crack down on the use of nitrates because of the fear that it will hinder the food production and the agricultural industries that the area relies on for jobs, economic growth, and business interests. Agriculture and food production is the economic backbone of the rural communities in Umatilla County. So, despite the fact that state regulators have spent years suggesting voluntary changes to help fix the problem, they've always stopped short of issuing mandatory requirements to the unregulated farms. However, there has been growing pressure from local communities to prompt state agencies to figure out like what's going on with the nitrate pollution and pledge them to do more.
This sounds like a pretty complex issue. Like you have people who this is their life and they need this for jobs, livelihood, and everything like that, but it's also affecting their environment. So what's being done? Like what's the solutions that's being proposed? Is there anything going on?
Another always very interesting questions. So in 2020, the Lower Umatilla Groundwater Management Committee released a plan.
Crushing that name.
They released a plan that was approved by Oregon DEQ and the Oregon Department of Agriculture. It was called the Second Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area Local Action Plan.
That is a mouthful.
Another mouthful. Its goal was to reduce nitrates in water to below 7 milligrams per liter and sustain that.
Okay.
Remember, the EPA recommends below 10.
Yeah,
so
it's like a good goal.
Yeah. They weren't successful in accomplishing that goal.
Oh, no.
And then in 2023, several of the area's top farms and agricultural processors formed a nonprofit called Water for Eastern Oregon. Their goal was ensuring access to clean drinking water in the lower Umatilla Basin. Water for Eastern Oregon says that their concerns about nitrate pollution is genuine and that they are committed to a long-term solution that would be quote-unquote science-based. So basically, Big Ag, responsible for 70% of the nitrate pollution, reintroduced itself as Water for Eastern Oregon. To me, it feels like they're running a greenwashing campaign to appear like they care about the issue and to make themselves look environmentally friendly. I'm not alone in this thinking, as many environmental groups worry that Water for Eastern Oregon is only interested in cleaning up the bare minimum of nitrate pollution in the lower Umatilla Basin. Then, in September of 2024, state officials released the State of Oregon Nitrate Reduction Plan for the lower Umatilla Basin. In the plan, 4 state agencies pledged to work together to reduce nitrate pollution. The agencies are the Oregon Department of Agriculture, Oregon DEQ, Oregon Water Resources Department, and the Oregon Health Authority.
Okay, it's like farmers versus them, sort of.
Yeah, kind of. They're trying to all work together.
Yeah, they all want the same thing, supposedly.
Supposedly, yes. Testing is a big focus of this State of Oregon Nitrate Reduction Plan. So for homes testing between the 5 to 10 milligram per liter, amount, they get retested every 3 months. And if they don't go over the EPA limit of 10 milligrams per liter after 1 year of the 3-month testing, they'll switch to annual testing. If their tests go above the 10 milligrams per liter limit, they get put on a water delivery system. So that means they shouldn't be drinking their water. They shouldn't be using their water for cooking. Obviously not ideal. And then they get put on a list to receive water treatment systems for their wells. So far, 111 households have received the water treatment systems.
Jeez, that's a lot.
Yeah. But there's so many more that need it.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty costly, I would assume.
Yeah.
So the Oregon Department of Agriculture has also committed to strengthening groundwater protection within the basin by developing new compliance standards focused on addressing nitrate levels linked to agriculture. The Department of Agriculture is considering establishing specific standards for soil nitrate levels that require record keeping for nitrate and irrigation applications and conducting post-harvest soil nitrate testing. They plan to work with farmers to implement practices that reduce nitrate pollution, and this big plan also includes educating residents about the risks of nitrate contamination.
Okay, that sounds like a potentially pretty good plan, but do you foresee any challenges moving forward to reduce nitrate pollution in the basin?
Oh, there's going to be some challenges, let me tell you. So, in the nitrate reduction plan, the Department of Agriculture recommends providing resources for farmers, enabling them to receive the technical assistance and the tools necessary to establish a standard and have plenty of time to meet the standards before any enforcement measures are applied. And ample time for Big Ag to meet these standards means that more people are without safe drinking water, and I don't think it feels right. One of the biggest advocates in the basin is Jim Doherty. Jim is a farmer and rancher and was previously the county commissioner of Morrow County, which again is the other county in the lower Umatilla Basin. When Jim was the county commissioner, he declared an emergency for the groundwater pollution. This caused a lot of backlash, and Jim was very quickly removed from office after a recall vote. Anyways, after the State of Oregon Nitrate Reduction Plan for the lower Umatilla Basin was released in September, of this year, Jim came out and said that he still sees farmers being heavily protected, even though they are causing the majority, roughly 70%, of the problem. And I have to agree with Jim. Some of the suggested self-reporting for the nitrate reduction plan won't even be initiated until 2026. So that leaves all of 2025 to pollute. Where is the accountability for these farmers and for Big Ag? It doesn't feel like there's any. Overall, it doesn't feel like the State of Oregon nitrate plan for the lower Umatilla Basin will be any different than the second lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area local action plan, from 2020, which was the plan that environmental groups called a failure. People still don't have clean drinking water, and nitrate levels are still rising across Umatilla County. So I think that there's a lot of challenges with this plan.
Okay, so this started 50 or over 30 years ago. Why is this coming up now? Why is this a thing in 2024 that they're trying to make this happen?
It's, from what I've learned, as always, it's complicated. I'd say that there's 3 reasons. They're only really now creating a plan to look into this. And remember, the plan, it's just to look into these issues. It's not really setting any definitive goals, which is wild. So the 3 reasons that I think they're kind of just getting into this is because the people that are being impacted, they're from rural areas, and they have low incomes. So that means they have less political influence than the people who may be from urban areas and have higher incomes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second, non-point source pollution, like nitrate pollution, comes from many sources and is difficult to fully track all of the sources it comes from. So even though we know that 70% of the nitrate pollution is coming from agriculture, there isn't like a single quick fix to the issue.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing. It's like hard to be like, oh, here's the solution, like let's fix it.
Oh, absolutely. Third, Big Ag, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of influence, and when they're propping up the economy of Umatilla County, it's hard to crack down on that. So, I think that those are mostly the reasons why, like, residents have been hearing about this for years and years and years, but I feel like this is why, like, other places are starting and, like, other environmental groups are starting to really, like, take notice.
Yeah.
So, okay, as a vet, how do nitrates impact pets?
They actually can affect animals. The biggest thing we see is they can get like sick from it if they eat a lot of nitrates. And if you have a high enough concentration in the water, the pet could definitely drink that and have an issue.
So, like, when you say eat nitrates, like, are they eating some animal poo or like
Mostly like fresh fertilizer because it tastes
Gotcha.
good. Like,
oh, gross,
like
sick.
bone meal fertilizer and stuff like
Sick.
that. The biggest thing we see in pets is GI upset, like vomiting, diarrhea. They can get really, really dehydrated, which they can die. Like it can get pretty serious, and then they can get neurologic side effects too, which is pretty serious. Most of it is short acting, but if your pet's like continuously drinking out of a water source, I mean, they're a mammal, humans are mammals, like similar symptoms will be seen. So it's definitely something as a pet owner I'd be worried about and pay attention to, especially if I was a vet in that county. Like I'm sure I would see that kind of stuff happening.
Yeah, probably.
See those patients. It's scary when you see it, like especially the neurologic stuff. It's really scary. So
This just in, not the reason we should care about this is not for the people, it's for the pets. Alrighty, that is it for the No Name podcast that really isn't a podcast, and it's actually my homework assignment. Thank you so much to Ellie, my vet friend, who was here posting the podcast with me, gave me some good insights on how nitrates impact pets, and was a great sounding board.
honestly, this was like a lot of fun. I mean, it's a hard issue, but I learned a lot. And it's cool to see what your friends are doing and learn about it.
Gosh darn right. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys.